TVS, America's #1 independent television network, presents the following sports exclusive. TVS presents NASL Championship Soccer. NASL Championship Soccer is being sponsored by the people who bring you the light, refreshing taste of Coca-Cola. Coke adds life to the games you're playing and the life you're living. And by Toyota, makers of quality-built cars and trucks, hopes you will enjoy today's soccer game. You asked for it, you got it. Toyota. And by the Miller Brewing Company, brewers of Miller High Life. If you've got the time, we've got the beer.
Welcome to Good Seats Still Available, a curious little podcast devoted to exploring what used to be in professional sports. Here's your host, Tim Hanlon.
Hey gang, how are you? Tim Hanlon here, as announced, and I welcome you to our curious little podcast devoted to what used to be in professional sports that we call Good Seats Still Available. Thanks for coming by. And today's a fun one, and especially if you were a sports fan in the 1970s, especially if you also had a television in the 1970s, where you were watching two very interesting and very colorful leagues, and some of which were brought to you by our guest today on television by the name of Howard Zuckerman. And Howard's an interesting guy because not only for a legacy career in television, which we talk quite a bit about, and television sports in particular, but he was in the directors and producers chairs for many of the broadcasts that you saw of the World Football League in 1974 and the North American Soccer League in 1977 and 1978. The place in which he did all that was an interesting and spirited little television network called the TVS Television Network. And that was the brainchild of sports executive and television executive Eddie Einhorn. And Howard was in the seat calling all the shots for a bunch of those telecasts that were rich and colorful, some of which unfortunately are not easily found. Hopefully some of our audience may know where some of these missing shows are, but there are quite a few of those, especially the NASL variety on YouTube, and we're also going to do our best to try to dig up some of the theme music that was on the TVS television network for the World Football League and the North American Soccer League, and some of the stories behind all of that with our guest Howard Zuckerman in a couple of seconds. Before we get to our conversation with Howard, again, a reminder and an admonition, please, to give us a try on the Audible audiobook service, which we love because not only have they been a gracious sponsor of our show thus far in our early days, but it's a damn good service. And an audiobook is truly not appreciated until you get a free sample of such, which you can do, of course, by going to our little website devoted to giving you a chance to do so. And that's audibletrial.com/goodseats. Again, audibletrial.com/goodseats, where you, yes, you listener out there in podcast land, can get a free audiobook download of your choice from over 180,000 plus titles to choose from, and a free 1 month subscription, if you will, to the Audible service. You can cancel at any time. It's kind of no risk. So I highly encourage you to do it. And there's it's a great environment, right, by which to enjoy a book when for whatever reason you cannot read, you do not feel like reading, your eyes are tired, you're driving, some other distraction, but where your brain can at least receive and enjoy storytelling at its finest. Again, audibletrial.com/goodseats for your free audiobook download and 30-day trial of Audible, our favorite, the one, the only audiobook service out there. Please give it a try. Give us a try. By doing so, you're giving a little love to the show, and we love you for that, indeed. All right, so let's move on to our discussion, our conversation, and our fun times with Howard Zuckerman, the former producer and director of various sports telecasts. We get into a whole bunch of things in here, not only the NASL and the World Football League, but we talk about even the NCAA and the beginnings of that in the late 1960s. Hell, we even talk about the Las Vegas Posse of the Canadian Football League, if you remember that team. And, a little thing called Live Aid that Howard was the director and producer of. So let's waste no more time. Here's our chat with Howard Zuckerman of the old TVS television network. So as you know, per my emails and whatnot, the focus of this podcast is around teams and leagues and various things that don't exist anymore in professional sports. And my real interest is I was piqued because I saw your name constantly popping up in various North American Soccer League broadcasts from the old TVS network. But right. as I dug a little deeper into your history, right, you obviously were part of TVS prior to that, too, with the WFL. Maybe before we even get into that, I'd love maybe for our audience to understand sort of how you even came across this thing called the TVS television network.
Well, that's a real simple question. I was working for WKBD in Detroit, which was owned by Kaiser at that time. This was in the early 60s, if I'm not mistaken. Somewhere in there. I can't remember the dates already. But it was back there then. I was a production manager for WKBD in Detroit, which was Channel 50 at the time. The station had just gone on the air, and they went on the air as an all-sports station. We had sports broadcasting all day long, or sports-oriented programming all day long, as long as we were on the air. It was owned by Kaiser, as I said. And Eddie Einhorn had just started up his little TVS network. And he was going around the country, and he was picking up basketball games primarily that nobody else was interested in at that time. It was all college basketball. And he came to Ypsilanti, Michigan, or someplace out in that neck of the woods. And he came to Channel 50 in Detroit and said, "I'd like to hire your mobile unit." So I went along with the mobile unit as a director. And we went out to Ypsilanti or wherever it was, and we did a game. He and I hit it off pretty well, and it worked out real well. And then the next week, he called me up and said, "Come to here." I don't remember where here was, but I went to the next game for him. And basically that started us. He then hired me to do the rest of his series with I'm trying to think which conference it was. Was it Mid-America? Maybe it was the Mid-America Conference, yes. And he hired me to finish up the Mid-America Conference for that year. And after that was over, he hired me again to start to handle as being his production manager for the rest of his series. At that point, he had acquired not only the Mid-America, I think it was that, but we had the Big Ten, we had almost we had over 11 conferences. And the series was that we would do a national game, either early or late on Saturday, depending on where it was. And that was most likely UCLA and Notre Dame, the larger schools. And they would do the national game, and they would go to the rest of the country. Then before or after the game, again, depending on time, we would have a regional game. So that meant we had usually 10 regionals followed or in front of the national game. And I supervised the production of all of those games. And he and a guy by the name of Alan Lubell, and I'm trying to think of it, Chris Zalamas, were out selling this. And we had almost 85% or 90% of the country watching these telecasts. And this went on for almost 15 years. And we had
to back up for a second. So we're talking about kind of the late 1960s here, and essentially what you're describing is Einhorn basically discovering or figuring out that college basketball could be a more than just local regional television thing, and to the point where it almost arguably, look at sports historians would say that the game like the UCLA Houston game in the Astrodome in '68, right, was almost like the national arrival of college basketball on television, right?
That's right. Yeah, we did the UCLA Houston game, and one of the give you a quick story here. One of the things is Einhorn in the early days used to sit out on the floor with the announcers. He'd sit next to them, and he was almost our stage manager at that point. And on the UCLA Houston game, all of a sudden on the big screen in the arena, while Dick Enberg was out there doing the opening for us, all of a sudden up on the screen pops up the words of the national anthem. And everybody in the arena starts to stand up. Well, you're looking at like 50,000 people are now standing up ready to sing the national anthem. And Einhorn picks up a phone that he had out there, which went to the control room upstairs for the arena, and he yells into them, no, wait up, at least 2 minutes or so. And they stopped. They didn't display anymore. And everybody's standing up watching Enberg do his ending. And then finally Enberg sits down, and Eddie picks up the phone and says, go. And we disappeared to a commercial, and they played the national anthem. Well, he had control of 50,000 people all at once. So it was just a funny story that happened that night.
So, well, that's also evidence that, obviously a lot of what you're describing and what we're going to describe in a couple of minutes here does revolve around Eddie Einhorn. Do you want to maybe take a few minutes and kind of describe sort of the relationship that you developed with him and or what you sensed his television essence was and his prescience, frankly, because he obviously saw things that others didn't at that time, right?
He had graduated out of Northwestern, and his roommate, as a matter of fact, I'm trying to remember what his name was, wound up owning the Chicago Bulls and the baseball team, and one of the Chicago baseball teams.
Jerry Reinsdorf?
I had a piece of it. Yeah, Jerry Reinsdorf, right. And he and Eddie were roommates while they were both going to Northwestern. And as a matter of fact, when this was all ended, Einhorn was invited by Reinsdorf to buy a piece of the Chicago White Sox, which he did do. And Eddie had sold at the end of the TVS, where we were starting to have problems. We were on the NBC owned and operated stations, which there were 7 of them at that point. He had arranged to get himself on those stations in the NBC markets, and they had kept going. And then at the end, he was starting to have problems selling and clearing. Now this is maybe 15 years after he had already started TVS. They were starting to have clearance problems. So he sold off all his remaining rights that he had to NBC, who took over the broadcasts and they had Eddie stay for another year or two to continue running the business. And then NBC took it over, and they did the whole production. And I did one of the conferences every week, and they took over doing the national game. It was a very interesting career. But he and I developed a really good working relationship, and we would go. We went to China together. We went to Russia together, and it was a pretty good life for 15 years there.
Yeah, I mean, I growing up in the New York metropolitan area myself, I remember some of these, I guess I'm trying to remember conferences now, ECAC Game of the Week, Marv Albert and Bucky Waters and
That's
seeing,
right, yep.
And frankly, seeing this TVS and NBC Sports thing, sort of as a co-producer or, production entity for this thing. So clearly you got NBC Sports basically going in college sports, right?
No, it did. And what happened, my memory doesn't remember everything, but the NBC people were very happy with this deal because we did all the regional games, and they took on a national game, which was fine for them. As a matter of fact, the other little thing that they did, NBC, in one of Eddie's good moves, all his moves were very good. One of the things that he did was he got NBC to produce the commercial reel, the 10 reels that went out to all the regional games every week, and we used to spend a bunch of money doing that every week to put 10 commercial reels together, because in those days we had developed a situation where the commercials ran out of the truck. So we had a machine in the truck that ran the commercials on the regional games, rather than going back to a control room and sending it out, which saved a lot of money, because in those days we used the telephone company to distribute the games around. And if we had to go into a control room and then come out of the control room to the regional, it would have cost a lot of money. But
so
that was one of the things.
Yeah, so in many respects, then, what you were doing, maybe unwittingly, was pioneering the sort of the art, I guess, of syndicated live sports programming in the United States.
Yes, we did. We did. We just didn't do basketball. We did a lot of other things. We started the soccer with Pelé from Brazil in the New York team, and unfortunately that league had a lot of problems.
All right. Well, before we get there, because that's something I want to go a little bit deeper in, no doubt. But I guess maybe as a prelude, though, so obviously success with college basketball, the NBC relationship going very well. You're going into the 70s. You've obviously you and Eddie and the team have become very, very good at doing live productions and sports and whatnot. But in the early 70s, circa 73, 74, kind of walks in this thing, this mongrel, this unknown entity known as the World Football League. Do you want to give us do you want to give us a bit of a sense of sort of how that came about and what your perceptions of the beginnings of that relationship were?
It was almost like the same type thing. Hey, we were looking for at TVS, we were looking for any kind of product that we could have that would he could keep the network going and make everybody happy, and that's what he did. He found, I'm trying to remember the guy's name at the World Football League.
Gary Davidson?
They had just started up. Gary Davidson, that's right. I think that was it was Davidson. And he came to Eddie and said, look, I'm putting this together, and here's all these teams that we're going to have. Would you be interested in televising this thing? And Eddie said, hell yes. And the next thing I knew, we were now doing football. And it was an interesting thing. There were things like they had came up with the Dicker rod. And the Dicker rod was a device that was on the edge, which was on the end of the field, on the sidelines of the field, which measured the 10 yards that they had to get to go first down. That happened. There was a bunch of other little things like that they did. But the one thing that I do remember from a long time ago was it was a team in Michigan, in Detroit, if I'm not mistaken, and they had a problem money-wise. And all I remember is that after one game, all of their towels and other supplies were repossessed by somebody, whoever owned them, whoever leased them to them. and they had a truck sitting outside the field that night. And as soon as the game was over and the guys had taken showers or whatever else, all the towels left. They had no more towels for the rest of the season, unless the guys were all bringing their own stuff in to play.
According to my research, that probably would have been the August 22nd, 1974 TVS game, the Chicago Fire at the Detroit Wheels.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Well, give me some sense.
I did over in my career so far. I did over 2,000 sporting events in the 45 to 50 years that we've been doing this. So I can't remember every game. I do remember the UCLA game in the Astrodome, and I remember when I went down for that game, I went into the press box, into the upstairs where they had the cameras for football, and that's where we were going to put two of our cameras right there side by side like football, and I used extenders, lens extenders at that time to get a wide shot because we were so far back in the stadium there.
Did any of those techniques come in handy when tackling per se the football, professional football? Any techniques that came in handy in how you decided to set up the scenario for covering WFL games every week?
No, not really. We knew what we had to do, and we had the coverage pretty well set up. And the football had been done a lot by not necessarily college football, but ABC did college football in the early days every Saturday. They had a deal with the NCAA at that time, and I did some of the games for them too, and then back in the early days.
Do you remember anything about the first ever WFL game that was broadcast? There is some YouTube footage out there, but it was in July of 1974, and the Jacksonville Sharks were hosting the ill-fated New York Stars at the Gator Bowl. Do you remember anything about that first ever game in your mind?
Yes, I do. I remember I had just worked with a bunch of people out in Chicago, and we had raised money for us to buy two mobile units, and we were going to go lease those out to the networks or any other producers who wanted it. And I remember that we didn't have, our unit was not finished for that first game, and we had hired an outfit out of Canada to come down and supply us with the equipment. And I think we did that game with like three cameras or something like that. It was real. We just didn't have all of the bells and whistles at that time. I'm trying to remember that. I think we did that in Jacksonville. Wasn't that right?
That's correct. And there was also something that happened at halftime. Do you remember what maybe happened at halftime during that game while you were broadcasting?
No, I don't remember.
Okay. Based on the footage that I've seen, there was a power outage in the midst of...
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, you had Merle Harmon calling the game, Alex Hawkins as the color commentator, and in that case, a third party, a rotating, I guess, sort of guest host. In this case, was George Plimpton. And during the halftime, there was the pleasantries, and Commissioner Davidson came on and said a few things, and then. Again, this is a YouTube clip, so I wasn't watching the game in '74. The signal goes out, and then you see Merle Harmon trying to kind of stammer his way through about 10 minutes of vamp to get while the power came back on. Apparently, the entire stadium lost power that night.
That's right, yes. And the only reason why we didn't lose power that night is that we were connected to a different power source than the stadium. If I remember correctly, we had to bring in power. We went to the power company down there and had them drop another power line into the outside of the stadium where the truck was parked. We had a lot of power problems over the years. I'm trying to remember. There was one other game that we had the same problem with.
So the actual mechanisms or the mechanics of these WFL games, as I said, you had You had a lead broadcaster in Merle Harmon, Alex Hawkins, who was
Merle Harmon.
Yeah, so Alex Hawkins, who is a former Baltimore Colts running back, as some would call him sort of as a gadfly, I guess, sort of good old kind of hang around informal kind of.
Yeah, he was. He was a great guy too. Let me say this: that all of the TVS talent that Eddie had found or whatever were really super people, and I'm still friendly with. I'm friendly with all of them, but I was really friendly with Dick Enberg, who's out here now doing. I think he does San Diego baseball. He was a good find that we had got, and he had been found by Eddie through J.D. Morgan, who was the athletic director of UCLA. When Eddie had made the deal to do the UCLA Houston game, one of the requirements of doing that game by J.D. Morgan was, hey, take my guy that's doing our games out here and bring him in to do the game. And Eddie agreed to that. And that was a good start for Enberg again, who worked for Eddie every weekend, did the national game. And now, as a result of that, he wound up going to NBC. And I think he went over to CBS, too, when Eddie went to CBS for a 2-year stint as the executive producer of the CBS Sports Spectacular on Saturdays. Yeah.
So the clips that I have seen that have survived, and by the way, I'm sure there are a lot of World Football League completists out there that would love to see other games that were broadcast. I really think that, I don't know if you've got a treasure trove of those sitting around in a garage somewhere, but
no, I unfortunately we don't. And we don't. The only one that I had and I lost, we had lent it to ABC back in, or it was the UCLA Houston game. I had that entire game, and the only thing I got back from ABC, unless they're holding it someplace, was was a 90-minute reel, which was basically starting in the second half. And Eddie used that in his book. He wrote a book, and they had a CD disc of the game. That much of the game came along with with his book.
Yeah, I will say what does survive, and I've seen on YouTube, I mean, looks like very high quality television production for football, right? I mean, Merle Harmon, I mean, where did he come from? Because he almost became kind of like the voice of TVS, like doing promos and setup, right? His name is.
Yeah, he came out of Milwaukee, if I'm not mistaken. Eddie found him in Milwaukee, and as a result of that, Harmon then became an owner of stores of sports media and sports stuff. He had stores in shopping centers all over the country for a while there.
And where did the idea for these guest commentators, these sort of third persons in the booth thing, come from? Was that your idea? Was that a spur of the moment idea? Was that an Eddie idea?
I think it was Eddie's idea. He always wanted to put on as many commentators as he could. I used to fight with him on some of them because it became unmanageable to have, especially in the football, to have 3 guys in the booth. I guess that may have been why ABC did it with Howard Cosell. Had the 3 guys in the booth. It was all right.
Well, you had some great names in there. Yeah, George Plimpton and McLean, Stevenson and Burt Reynolds and Dick Butkus and Rosie Greer.
Oh yeah. We had a whole family there of these guys, and we would hold a general meeting before each season with everybody who was going to be doing like on the basketball. Except they never came to any one place for the meeting. He would do it on a conference call, and we'd have maybe 30, 40 people on this one conference call, outlining how we're going to do whatever we're going to do.
Well, it must have been a bit.
We did a lot of things to save money. We did a tremendous amount of things to cut the costs down of doing these events.
Well, it must have been maddening, though, for you as a production person, right, to have to deal with a third entity in the booth that's different every week, who doesn't necessarily understand the, shall we say, sensibilities of a professional television broadcast, right? I mean, a Burt Reynolds.
There were some problems, but not really. I think everybody just who he has found absorbed the how to do it, and they did it. Most of these guys did it by their own, where they usually the play-by-play guy and the color guy and the third person would get together before the game got on and decide who's going to do what and who's going to tell what, and it worked out really well.
So what was your sense bringing these games and putting these games together every week? What was your sense of the league itself? It seems like it started out with a big blast in the beginning and then started to melt away relatively quickly. When did you...
Well, I think what happened is the teams, to continue to survive, ran out of money. It was very simple. They all the things that they gave away and promised and stuff, I think killed the league. They would give away, 40,000 seat stadium. You might have 1/3 of that was free. They gave to any unsold seats and stuff like that went to some college campus or to somebody, some charity organization. To continue to fill the stadiums so that people watching on the TV and so forth would say, hey, that's a good idea. Let's go there. It looks like a hell of a setup. In essence, it was, but a lot of the seats in there were freebies.
It seems that a number of stations that kind of signed on in the beginning of that season started to kind of melt away as the season went on. Did you sense that this was a bit of a sinking ship at some point? And if so, when did you kind of get that inkling?
Well, I think the problem became nationally we sold it pretty well. But I think the regional spots, in other words, every station had carried out the game. And it was almost like a barter situation where we ran X number of commercials in the game for nationally. And then each station got X number of spots for them to sell locally. And I think what happened is a lot of them was now carrying the games basically for free because they were having problems selling the local positions. It was not like the regional basketball because there was not a regional game, on each station. There was just a national game on the WFL. So they were having trouble selling it. I mean, if you had a station in New York, for example, that was carrying the game, and there was no New York team being televised that day, they would have a hell of a time selling an Indianapolis station selling a game that was not coming out of Indiana or did not have the Indiana team playing that day.
Yeah,
that's what killed the television.
Right, and you also had it seemed like an unending sort of set of I don't want to say lies or misappropriations, I guess, and the stories, I guess, got harder and harder to kind of control or suppress, so to speak, and I think that also sort of aided in the credibility factor, right, of the league, and then
yeah. All of a sudden, you'd have a team that would go bankrupt and disappear. All of a sudden, we were left with a situation where the game of the week that year, or that month, or whatever, had a problem. We didn't have an opponent for them because they were playing another game someplace. So that was part of the problem.
So did you worry personally about, as a job, teams and seem to be relocating and whatnot, and the ratings seem to go down, the stations seem to be going down. I mean, did anybody ever start talking about it or questioning, the whole enterprise as the season went on?
No, because I was anyway. I was at this base gig at that point in my life. I was a freelancer, and I had my own production company here. But we ran a lot of the business through me, sort of payroll and things like that for the television end of the thing. I did, but Eddie stood behind all the TV thing, and we never had a money problem on the TVS side. We would have problems of the teams were having the money problems, and that's what ended the WFL.
Do you remember?
I think Davidson, when he started the league, did not have enough cash behind him to maintain it. I think if they had maintained it for another year, they probably would have they would have been a big problem against the other football league here in town.
Well, it's my understanding that I guess TVS was in the mix to come back in 1975 in the reconstituted WFL, but clearly that didn't occur. And I wonder, did you miss having a second season, or were you kind of like, that was a fun experiment, but let's move on?
I went on to do other things. There was enough business for me, and I think for Eddie also. When Eddie sold this out to NBC, and then said sayonara, and then one of his friends at CBS called him one day and said, "Come over here. We need an executive producer on the Saturday afternoon sports spectacular." He went. He took Chris Salamis with him over to CBS, and that lasted, I think, for maybe 2 years. And then he said, "The hell with it, I'm going to retire."
All right. Before we move on from the WFL, are there any games or any situations or personalities or things that popped up or that you somehow remember that were either crazy or silly?
No, the only thing I really remember about the WFL was to the end, where they got back all the towels in Detroit, in the Detroit game. They were in Detroit. I think we were in Michigan someplace when that happened. And there were other teams that had the same problems. He was lucky if he was able to finish the second year, I think, of the league. I think it went for 2 years.
All right.
We were hassling. We didn't know where we were going to go for the next game towards the end there. We didn't know if we were scheduled to go to Jacksonville. We also might, as a matter of fact, sometimes I would send a mobile unit out and we'd say, call us on Friday, wherever you're driving, and we'll tell you which way to go, whether to go to Florida or continue going where you're going. So there were some weeks that we didn't know what the next game was going to be.
It's mind blowing. I mean, it's got to be. I mean, at some point you have to laugh, right? I mean, I know it's you got to be where you got to be.
Oh yeah, we were laughing. We were laughing all the way because we had enough dollars and so forth in the setup to pay everybody, our own people off, and to make sure that if nobody got really burned on our end anyway.
Okay, friends, sorry for the interruption. Just wanted to quickly remind you that today's episode of Good Seats Still Available is brought to you by our friends at Audible, the premier provider of digital audiobooks with over 180,000 titles to choose from in just about every genre you could think of. Audible titles play on iPhone, Kindle, Android, and more than 500 devices and MP3 players for listening anytime, anywhere. And for a limited time, my audience can listen to a free download of any book that they choose, as well as get a 30-day free trial when you go to audibletrial.com/goodseats. That's audibletrial.com/goodseats. And you can choose from over 180,000 titles, as we said, including one that I'm listening to right now. It's called The 10-Gallon War by John Eisenberg. That's the story of the NFL's Cowboys, the AFL's Texans, and the feud for Dallas's pro football future. Another one on my list, which I have yet to download but is on my queue, that could be interesting to our audience here, is called The National Forgotten League by Dan Daly, entertaining stories and observations from pro football's first 50 years. Those are just two of the many thousands of titles to choose from, and not just in sports history, but you name the genre that you might want to listen to, and Audible's got it. By the way, two guests perhaps that we'll have on the show, hopefully sometime soon. But again, go to audibletrial.com/goodseats for your free 30-day trial, as well as your free audiobook download to try it out for yourself. Again, that's audibletrial.com/goodseats. And now, back to our conversation. All right, well, let's move a little bit further down the decade then to this thing called the North American Soccer League. Do you have any prelude to that, and how had that relationship and conversation? I
think whoever the New York team,
New York Cosmos,
had contacted Eddie and said, "Hey, we're putting this league together with Davidson," and no, it wasn't Davidson. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, the NASL had been around for a bunch of years, since the late 60s, but it was only becoming newly ascendant in the 74-75 season, because you had more and more teams, and CBS had kind of played around with a couple of games nationally.
Yeah, CBS had been doing some. And then when Pele showed up in the New York team, that, I think, sparked some interest. And that was and we then picked up the soccer league. That we were doing only one game a week, a national game. I'm trying to remember the soccer. I know that that was a good run that we had with that.
So,
but like anything else, they end. Things on TV don't continue forever and ever. It didn't happen. Eddie would have trouble doing two things, because you didn't have. Remember, this was an ad hoc network, basically meaning that it just sprouted up whenever he had an event to do. He would be able to get the stations to come back on. I think we were having sales problems on the soccer league there, because soccer hadn't become a major sport in the United States yet, like it is today. And they did a hell of a soccer league, did a hell of a job starting with the kids to play soccer. And that sparked a lot of interest. But look how many years it took till we got the soccer league today.
Yeah, I got the sense that, especially on the NASL broadcasts, I mean, I lived in the New York area at the time, and those games were mostly, from what I remember, presented live, so we were lucky in that regard. But there were plenty of stations that were not broadcasting those games until even Monday night at 11:30 the next day, right? Which is kind of a graveyard for a live sports presentation, right?
Right, yeah.
So anything you remember about approaching the sport of soccer, right? In many respects, kind of a literally and figuratively foreign sport.
Well,
right?
I still disagree with some of the coverage that's on right there now. I'd like to go tighter. If you look at soccer that's on right now, they use a wide shot, which you can only see half the field in, to see what's going on. Where I used to have I'm trying to remember who the guy was from the soccer league. He and I used to have arguments all the time about whether we should be tighter in coverage and so forth. I like to get tighter. I did that on football too. Is once the team has set and you have established where everybody is, I used to go push in tighter to see where the ball is going to go. And on the soccer league right now, I'm watching soccer, is they use one enormous wide shot, which you can see almost every player on the field, and then occasionally they'll cut to something close. I don't like that. I mean, that was my own personal opinion.
Yeah, how did you approach and handle the unique flow of a soccer match, right? And the potential to miss goals and action and artificially insert commercial breaks and all that kind of stuff. That's had to be a new experience for you, right?
Yeah, the commercials in the soccer, because there weren't no timeouts. We finally got on the soccer league that we were televising. We got them to agree to have a couple of pauses in the game that we can throw some commercials in there. And so there was some fake, I don't want to call them fake, I guess, but that's what it was. There were some fake downings where somebody got hurt and they theoretically stopped the game and that kind of stuff. Because there were no commercial breaks in there. Not like they were in the other sports that were on TV.
You're kidding. So there were these sort of manufactured events to kind of slow the game down and create a sort of a natural break?
The league had worked out with all the teams that they were going to be a couple of stoppages in the game. The countdown clock continued to run while the whatever was on the field had stopped, and they continued to run until we, and that's why they added time at the end of the game usually to make up for the 4 or 5 minutes that we had stuck in some commercials in the whole game.
That's very interesting because soccer historians, I'm sure, are yelling at their devices now as they're listening to this. We'll remember in the early days of pro soccer in the late 60s on CBS, there was a bit of those kinds of shenanigans, and frankly, not that sophisticated, where they created sort of fake fouls, et cetera, for commercials. You'd think that there would have been a different approach by 77 and 78, but it seems like not.
Yeah, well, there was also a situation where some cases, when we went out for a commercial, we were still rolling another tape machine covering what was going on while we were away for a commercial. And if something had happened in that 60 seconds or 2 minutes that we were out, we had tape of what had happened in the 2 minutes, and when we came back on the air live, we would show that particular thing again as while we were gone. This is what happened, that kind of a thing. So nobody really missed any action in any of the games. Most of the time, because nothing had happened in that period that we were out for running a commercial.
So we had the color commentator for those matches, Paul Gardner, who was an esteemed soccer journalist on a couple episodes ago. Anything you remember about him and his partner, John Miller, obviously now very famous baseball broadcaster, about those first games and doing soccer on TVS?
No, I don't remember that. No, it was another event for us. I don't remember anything, spectacular about that.
That exciting it was, huh?
It was exciting. I think that the secret to those games in the early days was that we had a hell of a crowd attending the events. That I remember. They had a hell of a crowd, and they were very intense on the game. They were really in for the teams and so forth. A lot of it was foreign, immigrants and things like that. People had come over here, whether they had left their original country, where they were very into soccer. I'm living out here now in Los Angeles, and we've got the Galaxy out here, and it's almost like it was back in the early '60s here with this guy. This team here has really got the city up and dancing over the soccer. Yeah, I'm rambling here.
No, that's good. It's interesting because again, there are many more of those clips available on YouTube, and I've been a student of them, I guess, shall we say? And there are a few of us out there. And again, I do think that the production value of those games, again, obviously in the late '70s, right? With you have to sort of put that in perspective in the time frame, but still, like those WFL clips, the production of those games was very high quality and. It
was. I finally got Eddie to agree. For example, one little minor thing on most of your NFL games and so forth, the production crew on that brings along a lot of people with them. It brings along their own camera guys, so you got the same camera crew on every game that you're doing, and you don't have to train a new crew every time that you go out there. And we did that on those games. I finally got Eddie to agree to spending, you're bringing 5 camera guys in addition. That's 5 additional people, which meant 5 additional hotel taking care of and airfare and whatever the heck you did when you went from one place to the other. That upped the production cost. But at this point, he said, yes, If that's what it's going to take, let's go do it. He was a good guy. Eddie was a great guy in terms of he liked to save money, and I, along with him, did the same thing. But we never got to where we shorted the production value of doing that show. As far as I was concerned, they were all top notch, and we could put any one of those shows up against any one of the real commercial networks and so forth.
One thing I noticed on both the NASL broadcasts and the WFL broadcasts was the absence, that is, the non-existence of sideline reporters. Was that ever thought about as an element, or was that rejected early on? That was if you're two reporters or you're two people in a booth, or three in this case, we decided we really didn't need somebody on the field. I mean, if these guys could handle what it is, and we always had on all the games, both the soccer and the football, we always had a microphone set up down on the field, so that if we decided to interview somebody who just did something, our stage manager down on the field there, or our producer, associate producer on the field, down on the field, could always go and get somebody if we wanted to interview him, and put the headset on him, and we would interview him from the booth. Not any big problem. So we still had all the good stuff that way. We had on our show a couple of weeks back a documentary producer out of London who had a recent ESPN 30 for 30 film called George Best All by Himself, which is a story about George Best, who played for the Los Angeles Aztecs in the NASL, and obviously had a legacy soccer career internationally before coming to the NASL in the 70s. I don't know if you've seen it. I highly recommend it. It's a great story, even if you're not a huge soccer fan. But in the middle of that film, there's a sort of the end of George Best's history and story at Manchester United and his arrival in the United States, seeking a new sort of reset for his life. And the way that that's done in the film, which is partially why I reached out to you, is they introduce it with the opening sequence with the music and the cartoon art of the North American Soccer League broadcast. I think you will get a kick out of it, no pun, because of your involvement in it. But I guess I'd love to hear your thoughts about, if you remember any of it, where that music came from, which I think came also from the WFL games too. If I remember correctly, the theme music that we used for TVS, Eddie had run into some music producer or somebody out here in the West Coast, and Eddie went out. It was a big band guy. I'm trying to remember who it was, but he went out here, came out to Los Angeles, and spent about a week auditioning a couple of music people and so forth, and finally came up with somebody who wrote the theme specifically for him. And so that music was made only for us and didn't wind up with anybody else, to my knowledge, at this point. But Eddie found somebody out here, and we got it. He got the music made. Now I found an artist, a guy by the name of Jack Glasser, who I hope is still alive. Jack Glasser in Chicago, who did the animation for us. That was my next question.
Yeah, we did the animation here. The animation was done by a artist in Chicago. He did all our graphics, all our fixed graphics with the and a lot of it was cut to the music. So the music came first, and then the graphics followed after that. And it was the same theme, if I remember correctly, for everything that we did.
Well, I'm going to do my best as an outro for this interview is to find a clip of that music. And I'd obviously love to find, and I'm sure there are people out there, we're going to put it out there to our audience, who you'd be surprised can find lots of different things from various nooks and crannies out there. Maybe an original copy of that.
Yeah, I would love to have a copy of whatever you find.
audio, some of those cartoon graphics, those imagery, that all of it. There's a lot of great little tidbits out there, but nothing hugely comprehensive, especially on the WFL front.
Oh, as a matter of fact, I had Glasser, the artwork that he did. I had him design the artwork that went on the side of my 2 mobile units that we rated came with a company called National Teleproductions, which was I was the president of, and we had his Glasses artwork on the side of both trucks. One of the interesting things here is, as you talk about these things, it all of a sudden triggers in my brain there other memories that have been way buried that I don't. After 60 years of doing this, there's a lot of shows that a lot of water went under the bridge, and I can't remember all of those things. But when you start talking about things, then I start remembering what happened.
All right. Well, let's try to do a little lightning round as we try to round out here. Because our little podcast is focused on teams and leagues and things that don't exist anymore. I'll give it a shot and see if you remember any of these names or if there's anything particular that pops up. It's okay if you don't, but let's try.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. So the Los Angeles Express of the USFL.
I think a lot of that came from KTLA, what was it? Channel 5 here, which was they were doing televising a lot of stuff, a lot of the soccer here, and they had a contract locally. They were doing UCLA and they had USC. They were doing a lot of college stuff here at that time, and that's how Eddie had gotten involved with J.D. Morgan, who was the athletic director. From UCLA. That's how the game got done. UCLA Houston game.
And interesting. And I'm assuming that your preseason work with the then Los Angeles Raiders and the then Los Angeles Rams came about from that sort of relationship too, right?
Yes, it did. I did the Rams and the Rams and the. Who the heck is that? You just said it a minute ago.
Raiders, yeah.
My memory goes away.
L.A. Raiders.
The Raiders, yes. That's Al Davis. I remember those days with Al here.
Okay, here's one. How about? Do you remember the Canadian Football League's efforts in the United States, especially with a team called the Las Vegas Posse? Anything remember?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I do. I do remember that one. I televised the Posse, all of their games with them, and we went to Canada a couple of times with them, and I remember there was one with them when they went to Sacramento, California. They did one game up in Sacramento.
Yes, the Surge, the Sacramento Surge, I believe, was the team. Go ahead.
Yeah, what it was, and the power went out in the whole Sacramento. Everybody in the Sacramento stadium there was not enough power to run the TV trucks or to run anything in that place. And everybody was running on generators, portable generators. And we had one game the game we were doing up there that night, our generator died because of a bad load of fuel. We were on a diesel generator. It had a bad load of fuel, and the fuel clogged up the engine and everything else, and the power went out, and we lost that game. And the owner of the team, of the Las Vegas team, went absolutely bananas because we had knocked off his feed to Las Vegas that night, and we didn't get it back on almost until the fourth quarter. And everybody who was watching the game had gone someplace else, and that lost him a big promotion factor. But they sold a lot of seats in Vegas based on the television. And I remember we lost power there, and there was one other game that I did that we lost power.
Yeah. Given your experiences in the WFL and obviously in previous NFL and other football games, what was your thought about the CFL at the time coming to the United States and the extended field and all of that? You think it was going to make it?
The it was interesting because there were some rule differences, and don't ask me what they were, but I remember that one of the biggest things that we all had to get used to was there were different kind of rules in the Canadian Football League than we had experienced in the United States here. I think it was a timing problem also. But the same thing happened there. He started to run out of money, and that's what killed that league. That killed the American thing because you couldn't get a good audience to come and buy seats, once that happened.
Well, we've only started kind of our journey into lots of teams and leagues and stuff, but it's one sort of theme is certainly popping up again and again, and that is a couple of them. One, football never seems to kind of be unpopular, right? There always seems to be somebody, some entity, some group that wants to create either a challenger to the NFL, an alternative to such, for whatever reason, and owners who, for whatever reason, are not part of the NFL or have not been invited to become part of that club to kind of try it. It's interesting because you've seen a whole bunch of different leagues that have come and gone in football. You've got to look at somewhat with some kind of amusement, I guess, as all your legacy production heritage. Well,
I think a lot of the problems that went on here were all dollar related. When the people started getting one of these things, and the other thing that went with it, all of a sudden the payment to the players has jumped up tremendously in order to keep a guy. These guys are getting like $1 million a week or something like that in some cases to play a lousy 60 minutes of football. That's what's killed a lot of this right now. And I understand where they're coming from, because in the football side of the thing, you've got tremendous injuries and things like that, which could really knock somebody right out of his livelihood. And that's why they're getting so much money, because they finish 30, 35 years, when they become 35 or 40 in there, they retire, which they've been hit in the head too many times. And I think the violent nature of football is why you've got a lot of people watch this. People like to see violent things, and that's in my opinion. I don't, but that's what they like. That's why they show up at stadiums.
That's it.
I hope I haven't rambled too much.
No,
yet.
This is good. So I got two more questions for you. So, do you think, looking back on your career, especially in sports television, that cable television, right, which is clearly a huge force in sports today, and arguably is is maybe the reason why people still subscribe. Do you think that it would have been different for, say, the WFL or the NASL if cable had been around at that point? Because it seems like you were kind of doing some of the things that cable now kind of does.
I don't know. I don't think that would have happened. The problem with that they have right now with cable here, is like in LA right now, is you got too much on the air. It becomes a real big problem. All of a sudden, one night, and this was what happened in college football, and college basketball also. You're not going to have, in the days of TVS, we had an exclusive arrangement for the basketball where we were on Saturday afternoons, or Saturday basically, we had the exclusive all day. We were the only television until maybe 10 o'clock, 8 or 9 o'clock that night. You might have another game going on. But now on Saturday afternoons, because there's no exclusive like TVS had it, you could have 4 or 5 different games going on at the same time on 4 or 5 different networks, all at the same time. And as a result of that, the guy that's advertising, that was advertising on TVS, had the exclusive basketball situation. Now has got where he's got 5 basketball games on at the same time. Where does he put his money? And so what they've done is almost divided up the one event that he had before is now divided up amongst 5 guys, and that's what's been hurting here. That's just my opinion at this moment.
Yeah, I think
it was much better when we had only one team on the air.
Yeah, well, I think people kind of forget. I mean, I've said, look at this, for example, the WFL, right, which, you know, by all accounts was something to see in its demise. But, you know, in those first couple of weeks, I mean, you had, you know, you were getting 5s and 6s and 7-point ratings for national televised audiences, which is, you know, was a significant amount of people back then.
It is. Yeah. It was. But it started to fall off because everybody wanted to see their own local team. That's what I believe has happened, and that wasn't going to happen on the WFL. We were doing it in the college basketball because we were dealing with a local situation. Eddie was dealing with, you know, we did 10 or 11 games every Saturday, and he was dealing. He had gotten enough of these teams, enough of the leagues together, enough of the conferences to control what happened. So he would only let one thing happen on Saturday afternoon, and there was always a local game or a regional game on Saturday along with the national game. And I think when they sold this stuff, the guys could determine what conferences or whatever they wanted to be in, and that happened.
All right, last question, and I kind of buried this, but a little known fact, or at least for me, was in your long and esteemed career in television production, was this little concert in 1985 called Live Aid. What was that all about?
Yeah. Well, there was a guy here. There was a producer. What's the heck? I'm trying to remember names here.
Wasn't Bob Geldof, was
it? Yeah, well, Geldof was brought into this thing by Mike. What was Mike's name now? Hang on just a minute. I happen to have all that. I have a big Live Aid poster on my wall here. Okay, Hal Uplinger was one of the guys, and that was the producer of this thing. He was along with Hal Uplinger and CBS guy who worked director, Tony Verna. All right, unfortunately both of them have passed away, but the two of them became friends with me a long time on other events that we did where they had used my facilities, my truck, and so forth. And they called me and they said, we've just been involved with this Live Aid concert. Would you be willing to come with us? And I said, sure. And I went to a meeting with them. And basically what happened is I had 7 weeks. I became the executive in charge of production. And I had 7 weeks to put the entire production staff and crew together. And at that point, I developed a simple thing. If you don't like it my way, goodbye. And I took no meetings or anything like that. I just became a czar. And we just said, this is the way it's going to happen. And I made all the arrangements. And I'm trying to remember, we had a satellite company that got involved with us. And I think we used like about 19 or 20 satellites to cover the entire world. And we made we had a couple of countries that weren't able to carry the live show. And they said, we'll do a taped version of it. I said, well, if that's the case, we'll make you a taped version. And we made a 4-hour meltdown of all of the best acts that were on. And that went out to about 15 or 20 different countries. And I, as a matter of fact, still have that 4-hour tapes are still with me. And that's about the only thing I have out of this 60-year career that I've had. I have some other little basketball games, but nothing like that. The Live Aid concert was something unreal. We did some things on that nobody would have ever thought of being able to do. I remember in Philadelphia, when we parked all the mobile units that we were using, because we had 4 shows running at the same time, going out to 4 different networks at the same time. We had the ABC show that went on at night that carried it all night, as long as it was on. And then I had an independent network that carried it during the day, and we were feeding London and all the rest of the world. Or there were 4 different shows going on at the same time. And we had almost a staff of about 225 people. A lot of that came from ABC, who supplied us with a lot of the technicians. And we had 0. It was so good. We had 0 personnel problems with anybody for that 18 hours that we were on the air. Everybody just pitched in and did that thing. There was nobody giving us any hard time or anything once we all arrived at Philadelphia. And it was a hell of a deal. I had a great time on the thing. And there were some other little things, but basically that was a great show.
Well, clearly a stellar career in television production, especially in sports. Clearly punctuated, I guess, with the Live Aid thing, which is probably a once in a lifetime thing. Before we wrap up, anything you want to promote? I know you've got not only your own firm, but do you also have a piece of technology? I think that's also part of that. Do you want to plug that and tell us maybe?
Yeah, we developed. Jerry, my son, and I. My son right now has been with Fox Channel 11 here in Los Angeles for almost 42 years. He started when he was about 17, 18. And he's been with them for about 40 years right now. And we developed a thing we call the Score Box. And we have 3 or 4 other competitors out there. We've got this out to about 175 individual producers who use it on all of their events. And if you're familiar with watching sports on TV, either across the top of the screen or in the bottom of the screen or in one of the corners or whatever, there is a graphic, and in that there is a bar, a graphic bar, and in that bar there is the 2 teams that are playing, and there is the colors of the teams. There's a bunch of clocks, again depending on what the sport is. And my son and I developed that, and we've had good luck in selling that. We've sold it. A lot of our competitors in that business are leasing it, and it's a big number dollar-wise. And ours, you can put sponsor logos and things like that on it also. So that's been good for me.
Where can people find out? Where can people find out more about Scorebox if they wanted to?
Just you can go on the web or call me. You can go on the web and look on the scorebox.tv is the web address. Or anybody wants one, very happily call me on the phone, and we can set them up with something.
Well, great. Well, so we'll promote that a little bit, and if anybody for whatever reason can't figure out a way to get to Scorebox TV to find out more, just send us an email here at the show, and we'll certainly give you Howard's information for phone number and contact.
That's fine. Yeah.
Well, Howard, look, this has been an hour and 8 minutes of tremendous goodness. I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your day and regaling us and maybe being dragged back into some of the dusty corners of some of your television sports production history with TVS.
I started in the business when I was 18. I went to a school I came out of high school in Glen Cove, New York, and I went to a school in New York called the Television Workshop of New York, and we had 90% of the students in that school were all Korean War veterans who were going to school under the GI Bill. And there were just two of us, if I remember at the time, who were paying our way in. And that was a guy by the name of Larry Terrell and I. Larry wound up running a television station up in Milwaukee. And I wound up putting about 4 or 5 stations on the air across the country. And that was because I had the experience, and the experience was only coming out of school. But I was doing it at the right time for me anyway. And it's been a great life. I have no problems. I've been retired since from doing directing and so forth since the 70s. No, not the 70s. I'm sorry. Since 2007, when I had a stroke, and that put me out of climbing up the steps to get into a mobile unit, and that's when we've started the score box here, and that has helped. That has been a good deal for me right now.
Well, Howard,
I am retired.
Yep.
I'm retired. I'm living on a motion picture and television fun campus here in Los Angeles. We got all old people here, actors, directors, directors, salespeople, all this stuff. Everybody on the campus here. And there's probably about 1,000 of us here, all retired people, and it's been a very good life so far.
Howard, thank you. This has been awesome. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to keeping in contact, and I'll let you know when we get the show up on the air.
Yeah. Anything I can do, and if I ever get some more footage, if that ever shows up, I'll be more than happy to.
Again, we put that out to our audience to see if we can maybe find some nooks and crannies of footage that might exist out there that eludes both of us.
Yeah, I would love to have some of it. Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
Howard, thank you. Take care. My, oh my, that was fun. Howard Zuckerman, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us. And again, you want to find out more about Scorebox, it's scorebox.tv. And of course, if you want to find out more about our little show here, of course, that's goodseatsstillavailable.com. That's the place for that. And of course, if you also need podcasting help and production needs served, and please go to our friends at podfly.net. Podfly Productions down in Gadsden, Alabama way, and our friends Jerry Payne, Eric Begay, Corey Coates, and David Gregerson for helping us out at Podfly to make this production as professional as humanly possible. Until next week, we want to thank you for listening, and take care, everybody. See you next week.
This is the TVS Television Network.